Yeah, Namaskaram to everyone, and Namo Buddhaya, Swamiji and Bernardo. My observation is that since you guys discussed about the void in Buddhism, which is Shunyata, uh, in my opinion, Shunyata is inconceivability of things or Nirtsvabhava. And my question is, what is, in your understanding, this void in Buddhism or Shunyata in Buddhism is, and how much of it has helped each of you in your seeking of truth? And since we are also discussing deep sleep, particularly to Swamiji, I would like to ask, is there a connection between Shunyata and deep sleep?
Let me start there. Deep sleep, I would like to characterize it as not an absence of experience, but an experience of absence. And Rupert Spira also uses a similar language, I found out. It's the ancient Sanskrit texts, for example, Panchadashi also mentions deep sleep as an experience of absence. So its experience does not stop in deep sleep also. Now, your question about emptiness, it's not a central concept in Advaita Vedanta, but it's a central concept in Buddhism, especially Mahayana Buddhism, and especially the developments in Tibetan Buddhism, in Madhyamaka, and also the Chittamatra mind-only school. I have been fascinated by it, so that's why it played a role, if not in my spiritual development, in my intellectual development, certainly. I've been fascinated by it for about 30 years now, when I first came across Nagarjuna's Mula Madhyamaka Karika. Yes, as you characterized it, Shunyata, the classical definition in Buddhism, is Niswabhava, emptiness of self-nature. Another definition Nagarjuna gives is what is meant by the interdependence, pratitya samutpada. That is what we mean by emptiness. Again, emptiness of self-nature. I'll just say this. I did a lot of reading, but I'm not an initiated Buddhist, nor have I done the actual practices that, for example, a Tibetan Buddhist would go through, the tantric practices. I did a lot of academic reading, let's just say. And I still was not very confident that I have understood, I've got clarity about Shunyata. But recently, a book was brought to my notice by Jackson Peterson, who is a Tibetan Buddhist teacher in US and other countries. It's a small book. It's called Progressive Stages of Meditation on Emptiness. Progressive Stages of Meditation on Emptiness. It's written by Sultrim Gyatso Rinpoche, a Tibetan master, a contemporary. Short book. What it does is it takes up the concept of emptiness in 5 stages. The Theravada or the Shravaka concept of emptiness and the related practices and its benefits. Second, the mind-only, the Mahayana Chittamatra school, the mind-only school, its concept of emptiness and the meditation and benefits. Then the Madhyamaka school, the middle path school, with 2 varieties, the Swatantrika and the Prasangika variety. Prasangika variety, which is the dominant form, which is basically what His Holiness Dalai Lama, the Gelug school, all of them. In fact, all the Tibetan schools would claim that we are Prasangika Madhyamaka. Concept of emptiness there, and related meditation and its benefits. And finally, he brings in the Shentong school, which is a little known school. It was sort of suppressed in the history of the development of Tibetan Buddhism. And the Gelug school with the Prasangika Madhyamaka. Prasangika Madhyamaka is the philosophy, and the practitioners were the other schools of Tibetan Buddhism, especially the Gelug school, which is led by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And its leader is traditionally the leader of all the Tibetan Buddhists. But there was another group of monks called the Jonang school, the Jonang monastery, and they practiced the Shentong kind of Mahayana Buddhism. They called themselves Mahamadhyamaka, the great Madhyamakas. And there, if you see the description of emptiness, if you see it in that book, the description of emptiness, this is just literally the same description of pure consciousness or pure being in Advaita Vedanta. So there it's sort of resolved, at least to my mind. My feeling is the Shunyata approach, the emptiness approach, and the Advaita approach, they are different approaches. One should not conflate them. And so that's the beauty. If you have got 2 different approaches which lead you to a non-dual realization, that's the beauty. But my feeling is they're both pointing to the same non-dual realization.
Thank you.
Thank you, Swamiji, for that wonderful answer. Yeah. So the same question I would like to pose to Bernardo as well. Like, because he mentioned first the, about void in Buddhism in his question to Swamiji, and that's why I want to ask Bernardo as well. Like, what is his understanding of Shunyata, or the void in Buddhism, and how much of that has helped him in his seeking of truth? Bernardo, if you can answer that.
Sure. I mean, I'm not any kind of initiate, so I'll share a view with you for what it's worth, but I'm not sure you should take my particular view seriously. I don't. I entertain my view as a kind of a tentative account. That's all there is to it.
Well, that's all right.
Years ago, I found myself very unexpectedly in a state that made me sort of freak out after a couple of seconds. And when I popped out of it, the only thing that came to my mind was, oh, this is the Buddhist void. And if you ask me why did you make that association? I'm not sure, but it was the only thought that was in my mind. Like, oh, this was the Buddhist void. But I don't have any practice. I don't have any discipline. I was completely unprepared to find myself where I suddenly found myself. So I sort of bolted out of it like a cornered animal running out of reflex. But I kept thinking about it for years afterwards, and trying to reconcile that with analytic idealism. And the way I found to reconcile that was that I also have a background in electronics engineering. And engineering came to my rescue here, because in engineering we have this concept of a carrier wave. When you set a station on your car radio, and you say, I set my car radio to 102 megahertz, that's a carrier wave. The carrier wave in and of itself is just a single tone. It doesn't have any information beyond that single tone, a single note. The voices you hear or the music you hear are distortions of that single tone. So if the single tone is a sinus, what you actually hear, the voices and the music, is just distortions around the sinusoidal wave. And within the context of that analogy, the way I try cumbersomely to account for the void is, the void is not an emptiness of experience, because I remember something. I experienced something. And Swamiji's words were perfect when he said that. I thought, this is it. I experienced emptiness, as opposed to having been in an emptiness of experience. And how do I account for it in the context of analytic idealism, in which every experience is an excitation of an underlying field of subjectivity? I think of it as a carrier wave. When you calm all the distortions, something is left behind which is still experienced. It's a carrier wave. In classical Hindu music, the best analogy would be how do they call the drone? It would be the drone of Hindu music, that almost constant note in the background of everything that is happening on top of that. So that's how I would account for it. It definitely entails some form of metacognition. You're not asleep. You recognize the absence of content of your mind, so much so that when you are out of it, you still remember it, and you can point to it. You can't describe it, but there was that. This was there, and you start gesticulating cumbersomely like a child. But yeah, I think it's the drone. I don't know. I'm probably wrong. But when I came to this idea, something calmed down inside me. It's like, okay, at least I have a tentative account.
If I can pitch in, Ivy, just a comment here. And the special value of that experience would be that now when I'm back to seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, interacting with the world and my own problems and everything, it's still that carrier wave. It's still the emptiness nature. So the calmness that you felt, Bernardo felt at that time, that calmness can be carried over, theoretically at least. It can be carried over into our experience of the world. So when now I'm listening to not the drone, but music and speech and talk, it's still emptiness. And you can be as calm here. One of the practices in Advaita is just imagine what it was like to be deeply asleep, in deep sleep. No world, no thoughts, no dreams, no sense of self, no sense of even thinking or even cognizing I am asleep. If you're doing that, you're not asleep. And yet you are there. And exactly that is the you who is here right now. And this entire world, and this is a stunning claim, this entire world of experience, what we are seeing now, was all there at that time. And there's nothing here which was not there in deep sleep. So you can carry over the absolute calm and peace and serenity of deep sleep into the waking hours.
So, Swamiji, would you say Bernardo experienced samadhi, the window of samadhi? Is that what it is?
I have no doubt that will be a little samadhi. If you can prolong it, that would be the definition of samadhi, because they remain there for a long time. But definitely that's a glimpse, and technically that would be a samadhi too.
I have no idea how to get back there. None whatsoever. I wouldn't know how to even begin.
Advaita would say that's not important. You don't have to chase the experiences. Rather, take the wisdom of that experience, what it showed you, and know that that's exactly here right now. And so we can calm down and relax and live our lives with that peace and that really ultimately deep peace and serenity. At every moment, it's available to us if we choose.
By the way, I would like to extend my thanks to Swamiji for such a wonderful and detailed, description of Shunyata. I've been hearing across, and I've been reading across, on different platforms, on different books. And thanks, Swamiji, for such a detailed, knowledge about Shunyata that you have. And also, thanks, Bernardo, for such a profound experience that you shared. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ari.